All right, welcome to Hoops Tonight, presented by FanDuel here at The Volume. Happy Tuesday, everybody. We are live on AMP. Don't forget, if you're watching on YouTube or listening on the podcast feeds, that AMP is the very first place that you guys can get these shows. We're just going to hit two games from last night, the Warriors' impressive win over the Suns and the Bucks' impressive win over the Kings. And then at the end, I have some thoughts about the role that advanced metrics should or should not play in the MVP race. You guys could probably guess where I stand there. Before we get started, subscribe to The Volume's YouTube channel so you don't miss any more of our videos. Follow me on Twitter at _JasonLT so you guys don't miss any show announcements. And if for whatever reason you miss one of these videos and you can't get back over to YouTube to finish, don't forget you can find them wherever you get your podcasts under Hoops Tonight. And you guys have heard me talk about Game Time, the fastest growing ticketing app in the United States. If you're looking to get out to an NBA game, an NHL game, an NCAA basketball game, or a baseball game, or even a concert or a comedy show, Game Time has amazing last-minute deals on tickets to all of these. They took really good care of me earlier this year when my wife and I went to go see the University of Arizona's men's basketball team. And I'd like to get out to an NBA playoff game this year up in Phoenix to see the Suns. I've never been to a playoff game. I've been to a bunch of regular season games, but not a playoff game. But I know they're going to give me a good deal. I know I'm going to get a good seat. I know it's going to be an easy experience. I want you guys to check it out. So no matter where you live, get out and have some fun this week. Download the Game Time app, enter your email, and redeem code HOOPS for $20 off. Terms apply. Again, enter your email and the code HOOPS, that's HOOPS, for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. And then one last bit of housekeeping before we get started. Obviously, for the NCAA tournament, we're doing a special bracket challenge. So a couple things. First of all, for merch. While March Madness takes center stage this week, here at The Volume, it's Merch Madness. Just head to The Volume's website and use promo code Merch Madness for 20% off all merchandise from your favorite personalities at The Volume. And if you want a chance to compete against Colin Cowherd and myself and the rest of The Volume's team, join our bracket challenge. Just head to Yahoo and find the group The Volume Merch Madness, or type in bit.ly/Volume Merch Madness, fill in your bracket, and the top 5 finishers will receive free Volume swag. So again, you get to compete against Colin Cowherd, myself, everybody else at the team. I'm going to be filling out my bracket later today. It'll be some fun. Plus, if you finish in that top 5, you're going to get some free Volume swag. So celebrate the big dance with Merch Madness all month long. All right, let's talk some basketball. So the Warriors get another impressive win at home last night, has been a theme throughout the season. 123-112 over the Suns. It was never really in doubt. They went up 25 in the first quarter. There was a brief moment there in the third quarter where the Suns worked it back to 3. But then, as usually happens, when that sort of dynamic takes place, the Warriors immediately took control of the game, had it back up to double digits in no time. Draymond talked a little bit about this on his show this morning. But it's kind of a natural ebb and flow in these basketball games. The better team gets out to a big lead, or at least the better team on that particular night. The other team has to expend a ton of energy to get back into the game, and the team that's in front probably let their foot off the gas a little bit. And then when things start to enter a danger zone, the team locks back in, and the team that came from behind gets fatigued a little bit, and then we kind of get back to where we were at the beginning. Klay Thompson really set the tone at the beginning of this game. He had 18 points just in his first shift. I thought one of the biggest dynamics that led to Klay Thompson, because Klay Thompson got good looks to start this game. All 4 of his threes that he made in his first shift were on defensive mistakes from Phoenix. And, it started with miscommunications, primarily between Josh Okogie and Klay Thompson. Josh Okogie and Devin Booker. Booker was on Klay, Josh Okogie was on Steph. And one of the things that the Warriors do really well to confuse teams is they will run interchanges that lead into interchanges. And that really punishes teams that like to switch. Now, we talked about this a lot when we were talking about the Lakers and the Raptors, right? So the Raptors were hugging up on Anthony Davis and not switching that screen, but they were switching everything before. So it puts the switching defenders in a complicated position, because if they have to navigate a switch immediately before the ball screen, they're out of position for that ball screen. And that was happening a lot in the off-ball actions with Klay Thompson in this game. So imagine this. I'm Josh Okogie, and I'm guarding Steph Curry. And I'm preparing to deal with Steph Curry as he's running around all these actions. Now, as Steph is doing a dribble handoff with Klay, I'm tied up with Steph. Now Devin Booker screaming at me, switch, 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 because Klay is coming off this dribble handoff. Now I'm suddenly on Klay, and Klay is immediately coming off of a dribble handoff from Kevon Looney. Now, normally, if it's a dribble handoff and I'm guarding Klay and Kevon Looney is the screener, I'm in either a lock and trail position or a top lock position. A top lock position, I'm trying to refuse Klay Thompson's ability to use the screen. So I'm going to position myself between Klay and Kevon Looney and try to force him to cut back door where I'm probably going to have help because Kevon Looney's not a shooter, so the screen defender is probably going to be further back, right? But in that position, I need to be in position between Klay and the screen. Or if I'm in a lock and trail position, I'm in the exact opposite. I'm positioning myself right behind Klay, and I'm trying to stay as close to him as possible so that when he's flying off of that screen, he doesn't get separation from me, and then I can chase him over the top and funnel him into help in the paint. But in order to lock and trail or top lock, I need to be in position first. And if I'm out of position, I'm not going to have much of a chance to do my job in either of those situations. So what was so smart about what the Warriors were doing, and Klay got threes on 3 of this specific type of action in that first shift. If I am guarding another player and I'm suddenly switching on to Klay, who then's going into that dribble handoff, I'm out of position. And I picked 2 plays exactly like this that you guys can see that are on my Twitter feed. So go to @_JasonLT. I clipped 2 of these so you guys can see what I'm talking about. But you'll see Josh Okogie get suddenly switched on to Klay and then be hopelessly out of position to chase him over that following screen. You have to be so sharp with the Warriors in their off-ball actions and be so prepped for that switch and be ready and in position for that next action to have any chance. And there were times where Booker wanted a switch, but Josh Okogie didn't hear him or they didn't communicate well, and then Booker was out of position. And then there were plays where they did switch and Josh Okogie was out of position. There was even on I think it was the 4th 3 of Klay's first shift. It was a transition play, and Booker just was it's in transition. Klay's running through. Booker's kind of trailing him underneath the basket, and I think it was Draymond who ends up setting the pick, and Booker just kind of gives up on it and doesn't even chase Klay out there. He gets a wide open 3. In order to deal with the blender that Golden State puts you in, you have to be so sharp defensively. And, we've talked a lot about how I think that the biggest weakness for the Suns with the trade they made for Kevin Durant is their point of attack defense. And point of attack defense is not just pick and roll defense. It's also all chasing shooters around. It's locking and trailing. It's top blocking. It's chasing guards over ball screens. There's a bunch of responsibilities that come to point of attack defense. In the point of attack guys for the Suns last night were not ready for the challenge. They got punched right in the mouth. 18 points by Klay in his first shift. Then once he got going with the off-ball stuff, he had like a driving left-handed layup on Devin Booker. He had a nice post-up on Josh Okogie where he took a drop step towards the baseline and hit a nice bank shot. He just completely destroyed the Suns in the first shift, and it completely changed the dynamic of the game from the start, and it was basically over at that point. You're not coming back to beat the Warriors when you're down 25 in the first quarter in Chase Center. It's a done deal at that point. Even when they got close, like Draymond was talking about, there was no real threat there. And I want to shout out Klay's competitiveness because, Klay's always had a little thing with Devin Booker, and what I appreciate about Klay is beyond a shadow of a doubt that he's going to come out ready to play against the Suns. And because I've talked a lot about how Klay, he's kind of a funny guy and he's portrayed as a goofball, but the dude is a savage competitor. And it's one of the most underrated things about him as a basketball player. He was the one that set the tone early in that game and was a huge driving force. Throughout this whole season, Klay Thompson has been one of the guys that has kept the ship afloat despite some unfortunate circumstances. And then when he checked out, Golden State was up 14, and Steph took over from there. And they started running the same kind of stuff with Jordan Poole and Steph Curry. And they had a same kind of miscommunication that took place between Devin Booker and Damian Lee. And Steph got a wide open 3. And then Steph hit a nasty step back on Damian Lee. Steph kind of smelled blood in the water at that point and went for the kill. Because up 14, that's manageable. Klay got you to 14. Then Steph took over, got you up to 25. That was when the game was really over. And then I was really impressed with Jordan Poole because when Phoenix made their run and got it back to within 2 or 3 points there in the third quarter, Jordan Poole made 2 massive plays that got them back up to their big advantage. He had a nice driving left-handed layup where he initiated contact and went up strong on the left side of the rim. He had a nasty step-back 3. He was a big part of them getting that lead back up to where it was comfortable. And, Jordan Poole, a lot of Warriors fans have been critical of Jordan Poole over the last couple of months, and I haven't talked a ton about him. And one of the main reasons why is I'm a big believer in slotting. And the reality of Jordan Poole is he's a flawed basketball player. Like offensively, he's super helter-skelter. He kind of is like a controlled chaos. Like he plays out of control a lot. And defensively, he's very limited, right? That kind of thing doesn't matter as much when the Warriors are whole, because usually he's the only weak defensive link on the floor and the team can cover for him. On offense, they kind of rein him in a little bit with the overall collective basketball IQ on the floor that gets him to make better decisions, and he's attacking with more of an advantage. It all kind of works. But when guys are out of the lineup, that's where it's like suddenly he's in lineups with lesser defensive personnel. His defensive shortcomings become a bigger deal. He's playing in lineups with lower basketball IQ. Suddenly his decision-making becomes a bigger deal, right? That helter-skelter thing becomes a bigger deal. That inconsistency thing becomes a bigger deal. The way that Jordan Poole's game is shaped actually makes a lot of sense when the Warriors are whole, and makes less sense when they're dealing with personnel limitations. And so, the big three, Klay Thompson, Steph Curry, and Draymond Green, were completely locked in this game. And I think that's a big part of what made Jordan Poole's job easier and what allowed him to impact the game well from there. Every Warrior played well, it seemed like. I thought Draymond Green was frightening defensively in his first shift. You can always tell when Draymond's locked in defensively when he's closing out to three-point shooters with that reckless abandon. He's got ridiculously long arms. It's one of his best physical attributes. And when you see him sprint out to a three-point shooter in the corner and he reaches that arm up, it's ridiculous how much he can bother shooters even when he seems like he's out of position. JaMychal Green had a really nice burst there in the late first quarter. A slipped ball screen where he got a layup, and then on the very next possession, he jumped a passing lane and got a dunk. He was great. He's been, ever since he came back from injury, he's been awesome off the bench. I thought Andre Iguodala was really good again. And what's interesting with Andre Iguodala, it hasn't always been pretty since he came back. Like, he's had some nasty misses from three, and he's been a little bit of a liability there. And he's committed some fouls, where he's gotten out of position defensively. But for the most part, he's been really good. And just in the little things in the game, he's such a connective tissue piece for them offensively. There's a play in this game where JaMychal Green kind of caught on the right baseline, and Andre Iguodala cut out of the weak side corner, and JaMychal Green pushed it to Andre, and Andre threw like a touch pass just right on the catch that hit Moses Moody in stride for a nasty dunk in traffic. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm like, that's just a high basketball IQ, connective tissue type of piece play that makes everything work. And I think he's been a good off-ball defender for the Warriors since he came back. And I think it's shown in plus minus. In his minutes since returning, he's been plus 17 overall. Even in the 3 losses that they had, he was a positive in his shifts in 2 of those 3 games. Like, I think his basketball IQ and both offensively and defensively have made him an impactful player for the Warriors, even despite him still working his way kind of back into his shape. And they may not even end up needing him when they get to the postseason if Gary Payton's healthy and if Andrew Wiggins is healthy. But I still think it's good to have him as an option out there, just because he's not going to be scared. He's going to know where to be. He's going to know how to impact the game in his own way. It was a really impressive, dominant win for Golden State. They're heading on the road for 5 games. So they're going to have to figure out a way to translate this to the road. Draymond talked about it on his podcast. There's been a lot of talk, but they haven't been able to translate it yet. So this is going to be a good way for us to learn. I think their first game is the Clippers. That's going to be a tough one. They have a lot of perimeter size, which is a specific weakness for the Warriors with Andrew Wiggins out. So that's going to be a challenge, but they're going to have what it takes. And I think they'll find a way. I think you'll see Draymond Green guard Russell Westbrook again and play off of him. It's going to be a good challenge. This road trip is going to be an interesting one for the Warriors. And I haven't looked at the schedule to see exactly who they play yet, so I could be wrong about the Clippers first. But I think I heard Draymond mention that in his podcast. All right, let's move on to, really quickly, just on the Suns. I don't want to think too much about them because they don't have Kevin Durant, but the reality is their guards have to defend better. There's a reasonable chance that it could be the Suns and Warriors that play in the 4-5 matchup this year, and you're going to lose that series if you do not play better defensively in the backcourt. You have to be prepared for Golden State's blender. They're going to have to sharpen some things up. All right, Milwaukee, Sacramento. This was just an absolute masterclass from Giannis. Every once in a while, there are these games where you see a player reach a height that no one else really can reach. I used to see this a lot with LeBron when he was younger. Or like Kobe Bryant back in the early 2000s, in the mid 2010s, where it's like, oh yeah, like that guy's just better. You know what I mean? And the first half of this game was a great example. Sacramento came out and threw a great punch in this game. And we're not going to talk a ton of Kings today because we talked a ton of Kings yesterday. But like Domantas Sabonis came out just attacking Brook Lopez, even though he's given up a lot of size there, just initiating contact and finishing around the rim. Kevin Huerter came out guns blazing. Keegan Murray came out guns blazing. De'Aaron Fox was fantastic in the second half. They offensively, to the Kings' credit, everything they did worked pretty well against Milwaukee. Obviously their defense was a big problem. They gave up 80 points in the second half, but they came out and punched Milwaukee in the mouth with a great offensive punch in the first half. And on the other end of the floor, everybody for Milwaukee was off except for Giannis. Giannis had an outstanding playmaking game. He only had 4 assists, but I haven't looked up his potential assists, but he probably had 10 to 15 potential assists because guys just couldn't make shots. The Bucks started like 1 for 10 from 3. The only guy to make a 3 in that first 10 threes was Giannis. And then he was destroying Harrison Barnes in the post. He was destroying Harrison Barnes on the offensive glass. He hit like a pull-up mid-range jump shot. Just had everything going. Completely dominated the game on both ends of the floor. It was just an absolute masterclass from Giannis. And a great example of like the level that he can get to when he really hits the Jets and the problem that presents for other teams. We'll talk a little bit about that more here in a little bit. Chris Middleton. He was one of the guys who was getting those wide open threes from Giannis in the first half, just could not make them. Finally hit a shot there, I believe in the mid-second quarter, but I think he only hit 1 shot in the first half. Finally in the second half, he broke through and got some really good spot-up looks from Giannis and Drew Holiday. But the big thing that you can tell when Chris really has it going is that pull-up transition 3. That's kind of like his bread and butter. When Chris is really feeling good and in rhythm, he'll just bring the ball up the floor, get the ball into his left hand, high hesitation, rise up into that transition 3 while the defender's backpedaling. He hit one of those early in the third quarter, and it was like, that was it. It was like he clicked into gear. He hit like a nice relocation, like pump fake and sidestep 3 in the left corner. He hit a kick out 3 from Giannis on a nice drive on the left wing. Then he started going to work in the post, like spinning off of guys, and he had a big and one in the fourth quarter when the game was close to pump fake and draw the contact and rise up and knock down a shot. He's just so incredibly important to the high level half court offense element to the Bucks that can be a little bit of an issue for them in specific matchups, not really for the Kings, but in some specific matchups. I don't think it was a coincidence that the Bucks went for 80 points in the second half of this game. When they really have it going with their spot-up shooting alongside a locked-in Giannis Antetokounmpo, they're really difficult to guard. And way too often when we're talking about Giannis, we talk about him as an offensive player who's just a bully ball player who can't do much on the offensive end of the floor skill-wise compared to his peers. And that just couldn't be further from the truth. The dude is he is a much better playmaker than Kevin Durant. He's a much better playmaker than Jason Tatum. He's a much better playmaker than Paul George or Kawhi Leonard. Of all those guys who are those big forwards at that position, other than maybe LeBron, he's the best passer. That's a huge part of his game that goes underrated. And it just comes from reps year after year of him going against walled up defenses that are trying to seal him off from the paint. He's just figured that part of his game out. And, when you kind of put it all together, that's why I have the Bucks right now as the safest bet to win the title at this point. That could change. We're going to reapproach it mid-April. If teams are healthy, I'll have to reconsider it, certain teams, right? But right now, I think they're the safest bet. Giannis is the best player in the world. He's the best defensive player in the world. He's a top 5 offensive player in the world. And his game translates to the playoffs at an extremely high level. All of that is fact. Chris Middleton is the high-level shot-making piece and the spot-up piece that was severely missing. Him and Joe Ingles, although Joe Ingles didn't play last night, dealing with some injury management. But, Chris has had a rough year. He's been in and out of the lineup with injuries, hasn't looked like himself, but he's peaking, it seems like, at the right time. Obviously, we'll see if last night was a fluke or if he can continue that here down the stretch. But if he can add just that little bit of high-level shot making, and if he can add that high-level spot-up shooting that they're missing, that's going to be just a game changer. That was the difference in that Boston Celtics series last year. They just could not. It was a lot of Wesley Matthews. It was a lot of Grayson Allen. It was a lot of Bobby Portis. A lot of guys that were just a little bit inconsistent knocking down those kick-out threes. And this year it's going to be different. Javon Carter is a miles better spot-up shooter than he was last year. He couldn't play last year because Bud didn't trust him to knock down shots. He's going to get those minutes this year. He's a much better point of attack defender than guys like Grayson Allen or Pat Connaughton. But Pat Connaughton and Grayson Allen both do their jobs. They're perfectly fine rotation players for a playoff team. Obviously, Jay Crowder is an option for them as that bigger physical forward to throw at certain teams. Joe Ingles didn't play. He can run second side action, is an excellent passer, is a great spot-up shooter. Drew Holiday, one of the best point of attack defenders in the league. I get a little frustrated with him offensively sometimes because he takes such difficult shots, seemingly unnecessary, but there are other nights when that can be a ceiling raiser for this team when he's making them, right? So really when I look at it, they have every bit as high a defensive ceiling as anybody in the team except for maybe Boston, just because Boston has a little bit more wing athleticism. But even then, I would argue in just a different archetype of defense that Milwaukee's defense is every bit as good. And then on the offensive end of the floor, when they have Giannis surrounded by that level of offensive skill and Chris Middleton playing at that level, they're not going to be that far behind the teams like Boston. They're not going to be that far behind. They're not going to be that far behind the teams in the Western Conference, especially if Giannis is playing at this level. So, I think they're the safest bet to win the title. We'll see what happens over the course of the next month or so if we need to adjust that. But man, I think I'd take them defensively and offensively over Boston right now. I'd have to think about it more, and Boston lost another tough one in Houston last night. Boston is going like this, and Milwaukee's going like this. It's just, I think it'd be foolish to bet on anybody else out east right now. All right, before we call it a day, I want to talk a little bit about the MVP in advanced metrics. So this was a debate that I had with Matt Moore from the Action Network the other day. And then Draymond actually brought it up a little bit, not the advanced metrics part, but brought up the MVP debate again today, and it got me thinking. So Chris Mannix, one of our coworkers here at The Volume, said that him and Nick Wright had a debate over Jokic and Embiid. And they talked a little bit about the advanced metrics thing. And I want to be clear, I'm in the minority here. I do not have a vote. Obviously, I hope to one day, but I do not have a vote. And the people that do, the majority of them do factor in advanced metrics. I completely disagree with that. There's a couple reasons why. First of all, when it comes to advanced metrics, I just find them to be useless data. The comparison that I made was the Zestimate on Zillow. I worked in real estate before I did this. It was the flexible job that I could do to make money while I was trying to pursue this career. And, all the time I'd get asked by listing clients but my Zestimate said this, And the Zestimate was just a basic algorithm that would take basically average sales prices from the neighborhood, right? But the reality is of real estate is no two houses are alike. Unless you're in real tract home areas, most houses are different, especially in Arizona because Arizona is kind of more spaced out. There's big pieces of dirt, right? Like my first home was on almost an acre. That was my first home, an inexpensive home that was on literally 2/3 of an acre, right? You're not getting that in other areas. So different, every lot is different. What kind of views do you have? Pool, no pool is a big thing in Arizona because how hot it is. The houses are, there's old slump block homes that are from the 1960s, and then there's these brand new stick and stucco homes from the early 2000s. They're also different. So I would just tell my clients, the Zestimate means nothing. I have to run detailed comps of all these different things that are similar to your home in order to find a realistic valuation. So what I would tell them is the Zestimate's fun. It's fun to look at. But the reality is it doesn't actually mean anything when it pertains to what your house is actually worth and what someone's willing to pay. That's the way I look at advanced metrics. They're fun. It's cool looking at player efficiency rating or Raptor or, ESPN Real Plus Minus or any of these catch-all metrics. But the reality is the game of basketball is so much more complicated than that. And you cannot hope to assign a player's basketball value to a number. I think it's blasphemous to the game of basketball. And what was funny is Matt Moore, his point was you can't trust your eyes. Your eyes will deceive you. You need concrete data. And my counterpoint to him was, I don't view that as concrete data. I agree that eyes are flawed. There's no doubt. I make mistakes with my analysis all the time. That's a big part why I read the comments. You guys do a good job providing different perspectives. If you're a fan of the Sacramento Kings, you watch more Kings games than me. I might watch 40 to 45 Kings games a year. You're going to watch 82 Kings games every single year. So you're obviously the eye test is a flawed concept. But so is the data. And I think that it's a lost cause. You are never going to be able to assign basketball to a single number. I still believe in data. You guys know I look at data for, single play types. Like, I like to look at pick and roll points per possession, post up points per possession, isolation points per possession. I like to look at defensive ratings, offensive ratings, all lineup data. But all of those are directly associated to the scoreboard on a per possession basis. So they're much more accurate. But even those aren't 100% accurate. Because if a player that's on a team that has tons of shooting, his pick and roll points per possession is going to be swayed by the fact that he's got 3 great spot up shooters off of him. Whereas, like LeBron, with the work he was doing in pick and roll earlier in the season, surrounded by a bunch of garbage shooters, like it's different for him. So even the data I look at is not perfect, and I'll acknowledge that here. But like the single metrics, the catch-all metrics, they are hopeless in their endeavor to try to capture the game of basketball. So my thing is like, what you're considering to be concrete data, I don't consider to be concrete data. And I'm okay with the fact that we can never sum basketball up to an exact science. I'm good with that. I love the organic nature of basketball games. I love that you can be the better team for 100 possessions, but if you don't execute on 2 possessions at the end of the game, you can lose. I love those details about the game. And what I've always said is the counter to my eye test mistake, the mistakes that I might make with the eye test, is that we have a huge voter pool. Like if I've got 100 people that are watching the games with their eyes and voting based on their eyes, it's going to average out to something that's closest to the truth. And I would much rather fail with my eyes trying to perceive the realness of the game of basketball than to point to an algorithm and let them do the work for me. Not to mention, like, there are so many, like, let's break it down from a math perspective. What is an advanced metric? It's basically an equation with variables, and you're plugging in the variables and you're getting out a result, right? Maybe that's points per game. Maybe that's your plus minus weighted for, like, they're super complicated now. Like these, if you look at the formula for like Raptor, it's ridiculous. The amount of detail that they put into it. They're trying, they're failing, but they're trying. But here's the thing. Where is the variable for a player's ability to move without the basketball, to relocate? Where's the variable for a guy who sets better screens than his opponent? Where is the variable for the guy who runs his lane in transition every time and doesn't get the ball but occupies defenders? That's just like 4 examples. If I really thought about it and made a list, I could probably make like 50 or 60 different basketball skill set things that are literally impossible to measure statistically. And because of that, it will never be possible to capture the game of basketball in a single metric. So I know I'm in the minority. I know they disagree. But if when I become a voter, if it happens, if I'm lucky enough, if I'm blessed enough to become a voter on NBA awards, I will do my very best to watch the games and come up with what I believe is my best guess at who deserves what. And I will not allow myself to use a flawed metric to cheat the work. And I'd rather fail with my eyes than fail by being lazy. And I know that I'm not calling those people lazy. Those people also watch the games. But I just think, like, they actually factor that stuff in. A huge part of why Jokic is number 1 in MVP voting is because of the advantage he has in the advanced metrics. And I just don't think that that's good process. So again, that's just my 2 cents on it. It's a lot more complicated. You guys know how I feel about MVP. I'm a big thirds guy. Like, who's the best player in the world is a third of it. Who's the best player on the best team is a third of it. Who's the most valuable is the third of it. That's kind of the way I break it down. That's just my thing. Everyone's got a different opinion on it. Who's the best player in the world part is where I factor in postseason success. I believe postseason success should matter. Yes, it's a regular season award, but we're in pursuit of the Larry O'Brien. That's the goal. So, I think that stuff matters. All right, I'm off my soapbox. That's all I have for tonight. We're going to be back tomorrow morning, guys. We're going to have a bunch of games to talk tonight. I'm going to try to get into some more Eastern Conference teams tomorrow as well. As always, I sincerely appreciate your support, and I will see you guys tomorrow.